4 p.m. Good evening, everyone. This is Fort Collins Mayor Wade Troxel, and I've been asked to kick off this meeting and give some introductory remarks and pass it over to Commissioner Johnson. Thank you all for joining us for this joint meeting between the Fort Collins City Council and the Larimer County Commissioners. It's always a real treat to get together and to have a conversation, so appreciate that. We are meeting remotely tonight using Zoom. While there is no public comment during this meeting, but anyone from the public may watch. The link to this meeting can be found by selecting the event on the event calendar that can be found at fcgov.com/events. fcgov.com/events. We are interested in your feedback on the items being presented. Please feel free to submit your comments through email to cityleaders, one word, @fcgov.com or to bocc@larimer.org. So tonight, the Fort Collins City Council is hoping to have a conversation that honors the longstanding partnership between Larimer County and the City of Fort Collins that works towards mutual understanding. And we are grateful to the Larimer County Commissioners for agreeing to a meeting in a rapid time frame. And we wish to thank the Larimer County staff for their significant work that went into preparing the materials for tonight's discussion. I'd also like to take a moment, a little bit of background and context for the conversation tonight. Councilmember Kniff and myself are both have been, we both collaborated with Commissioner Johnson and elected officials from Loveland and Estes Park since 2016 to support the development of the regional waste plan. And since the solid waste infrastructure master plan was adopted by Larimer County in 2018 and our mutual intergovernment agreement was adopted in 2019, the new policy council, which we serve on, we met earlier today, has also included Commissioner Kafalis and elected officials from Wellington. The solid waste infrastructure master plan calls for construction of a transfer station and demolition of the recycling facility and the yard and food waste compost facility on the property adjacent to the Larimer County landfill. In 2018, a portion of the same property was identified for development into a behavioral health facility. That was a successful tax initiative where we all work together. We acknowledge the strong support of the behavioral health services among our council and our community. Fort Collins Council member Susan Kukowski has represented Fort Collins City Council on the Behavioral Health Policy Council. And since there are mutual uses vital to the community being planned in close proximity, we are grateful for the opportunity for all members of the council and the community to understand these projects and how important they are and how these facilities are so needed and where we can work together. And I would just like to point out that, we've been working as a city on a number of things related to, in addition to the behavioral health and the transfer station and the compost facility. We're also been involved with looking at the impacts related to planning. And so I'd like to, at some point, have Rebecca Everett comment as to the work the city has done regarding planning. And then Lucinda Smith has been working and has some comments with regards to equity and environmental impacts as well. So with that as an introduction, and I should also mention today our PAC met and we had an outcome from that we'll be working towards a public open house to talk about the combined transfer station, compost facility, and the behavioral health facility. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that here tonight as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague and for a long time, Commissioner Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank the city staff for hosting this meeting, and I arranging the Zoom presentation. We're very happy that the public is able to listen in on the meeting. We've certainly learned how to do a lot of things a little bit differently in the pandemic environment. Communication for all of us is a little bit different than it usually is, and maybe even a little bit more difficult than it usually is. And certainly both the city and county governments have a lot of additional pressing business on our plate that distracts us with some of the traditional important business that we've been working on. So we appreciate you doing that. Mayor, you took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. We've been working together in partnership, and partnership, I think, is going to be a theme of the meeting tonight, I hope. We've been working in partnership since March of 2016, I think was our first meeting. We've expanded the policy committee recently. Our staff had been working since a year or more before the elected officials came together. So I really want to thank the staff of Fort Collins, Larimer County, City of Loveland, Estes Park. They have been doing a tremendous amount of work, which I think it's important for some of the folks that are new joining us and maybe some of the public to realize what we've been able to accomplish through this partnership and through this master plan is truly a remarkable environmental achievement. We are moving from basically an unlined landfill that was built in the 1960s and operated to a very state-of-the-art environmentally responsible and creative process that really takes us forward a couple generations over where we have been in the past. And we're achieving a 40% or more diversion rate of material from our landfill. And that is very, very significant in Colorado's environment where landfilling is very inexpensive and we have competitive landfills in our area as well. We've also made some very significant advances in collaborative governance that are very, very important and very novel and very innovative. Not just in waste shed management, but the mayor referred to mental health, the Behavioral Health Policy Council. Both of these groups bring together municipal partners, county partners, providers in the community, and citizens and the public to really run these facilities in a very collaborative manner. And that governance structure is really pretty innovative and unique. And some of the innovative techniques that we're talking about developing together at the current landfill site and at our new landfill site, I think it is important to remember that the ability to do those is the result of the fund balances that have been built up over the years. The county landfill operation is an enterprise. It doesn't get general fund property tax money from the county. It operates on the fees, the tipping fees that individuals and businesses pay to use the facility. And we built up quite a balance over the years, knowing that there were going to be closure costs and monitoring costs of a closed landfill for over 30 years or more. But we've been fortunate that we have enough balances now to also construct some very innovative construction and demolition recycling, some composting and food waste diversion, enhanced recycling, and operate a transfer station at this current facility that will be very convenient for our citizens. And lastly, I think it's important to think about the partnership. A partnership is a unique collaborative relationship where not everybody gets everything that they want in the relationship, but we all get to do more than any of us could do individually, than we could do on our own. The other thing to remember is this partnership and the relationships that we're building are going to last way beyond almost every one of us on this call this evening. This landfill is going to serve us for future generations in our community, and us as individual policymakers will be gone, but it's important that we create something that serves our community. Each of us as individuals may want to see something different happen in that partnership, but what's important is to develop a partnership that will run the facility in a collaborative manner that meets the needs of our community, the desires of our community, innovations in waste shed management and innovations in environmental policy that really will keep Northern Colorado and our community on the cutting edge of technology and waste management and environmental responsibility. So we're very grateful for the partnership that we have from Fort Collins. It's anything worth doing very often is difficult, and there are challenges in doing that. But as we face those individual challenges, and sometimes we get consumed by those challenges, I think it's important to keep our eye on the goal. Our eye on the goal is an environmentally responsible waste management system for the future that will serve generations, and a collaborative partnership relationship that brings governments together in ways that we haven't had the ability to do in the past. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have our discussion tonight. The mayor mentioned, and Rawson, the mayor, and I were on the policy council today, and we got very good updates from Lori Stolen on the behavioral health facility plans, and from Lou Perez on what the plans are with the composting, and we're very excited to share that work with you tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And with that, our first item tonight is the overview of the progress and the status of the landfill. And the presentation will be given by Lori Kettridge, the Larimer County Community Planning and Infrastructure and Resources Interim Director. So Lori, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's get the presentation set up for you. We're all set. Where'd we go?
Oh, you have to go to presentation.
There we go.
Hi, Emily.
Go to the
I can't use
slideshow.
the other one, huh?
Slideshow
All right.
from the beginning.
Thank you.
There you go. You're right.
All right. The most important part on this slide is to.
Hold on, you're not sharing yet, I don't think, Lori.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
If you go back down to share screen, and then when the box comes up,
Yeah, it's not showing.
Okay, so you have to get out of this.
hit escape. You can get
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
let's go back to,
back into Zoom.
and go here. Oh, there you go. There you go. Now there's Zoom. Got it. And then hover, go open up Zoom.
And I'll just mention while we're getting set up that
Well, that
if
is not
someone
working.
you would like to make a comment, there's the raise your hand feature within the
Share,
participant.
there you go, hit that.
If I missed that, please go ahead and comment. So, okay, we're about ready to go.
Here we go. Now go back to from the beginning.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
The most important part on this first slide is to take a look at the partnerships we have. And so for those elected officials who are new to our wayshed plan, we are a regional effort, and we are the first in the state of Colorado to take a regional approach. And much like the folks for the behavioral health side, we're being looked at by others in the state of Colorado as well as in the nation to look for ways that we can take care of solid waste in our region as opposed to looking at isolated communities. Tonight, the work that we have for you from a staff perspective includes a solid waste facilities overview, the progress on the transfer station, composting facility, and our history and construction planning on the behavioral health. We also have our consultant here tonight, Keith with Ditesco, and he is our project manager for both the transfer station and the behavioral health. So if you do happen to have any technical questions or questions about construction, we can get Keith on the phone or on the computer to answer. I wanted to give just an overview of what our goals were. These are goals that were established around 5 years ago now as the original policy and stakeholder teams were put together. And the first and most important goal is to establish that regional materials management system, and then to implement shared programs and facilities that go with those. Further, to develop waste diversion, and both the mayor and Commissioner Johnson spoke about that 40% diversion rate and reduction goals for all parties. And that includes all of our regional partners. Lastly, we're very interested in and very close to hiring a communications specialist to help us in this effort in making sure that all of the communities in the region are sending consistent public education messages to the residents in their areas so that we can meet our diversion goals. Here's what the Wayshed Coalition looked like before we became who we are today. There was technical staff, elected officials, and a stakeholders advisory group. Through their 4-year effort, they developed a master plan for the solid waste infrastructure. And those of us around the table today have inherited that plan and are beginning to implement it. Here's when we began service, is in 1963. Our planning efforts towards the waste shed began in 2014, and final implementation, expected implementation, I should say, of the Tier 1 projects will occur in 2024. The bullets below just give you an idea of what is in that framework and what our goals continue to be to deliver the work that was done before us. We solidified the waste shed management plan through intergovernmental agreements. So all of the communities that you saw listed in the beginning have entered into an agreement to carry out the waste shed plan. The obligations of Larimer County are unique in terms of operating the facilities, funding, building, owning, and managing the new facilities that were identified by all parties. The obligations of all of us include exploring any kind of code changes that are needed to assist with the solid waste diversion to achieve those 40% goals, to participate in the Solid Waste Policy Council, and very importantly, to coordinate data and education throughout the region. The IGA does not obligate parties to enact the new policy, rather have discussions about that, and then it's up to each elected body to enact any policies they think would be helpful to the waste shed and to the region. We do have minimum standards for waste hauling expected, and we're working on hauler licensing at this time. The main projects that you'll hear about from everyone are what we call the Tier 1 projects, and these are projects under development, and they were agreed to by the original parties as the waste shed plan was developed. Those include a central transfer station, and you can kind of see pieces of that here. The importance of the transfer station is that our existing landfill is reaching capacity. And once the landfill reaches its capacity, we have to transfer solid waste materials to another location. And I get to show you about our new landfill. And we believe it'll work most efficiently to have a transfer station near the existing site, and then to use heavy equipment to transfer the solid waste from this site up to the new north site. The second component of our Tier 1 is to develop that new northern landfill. Further, we're working on a waste organics processing facility. Lou's going to give you some more information on that. As well, we're exploring ways that we can divert construction and demolition. Before COVID, we actually had a pilot project we were going to work on with a private party. Unfortunately, through the economy or lack of economy through the COVID epidemic, that party's no longer able to work out a pilot project with us. So we're looking for additional partners there. This gives you an overview of where the northern landfill is. Here, the yellow is the property that the county owns itself. Here you can get yourself in perspective with Wellington here. I know there's been interest previously and a little bit today, possibly, about what the haul routes may be. We've done a lot of work recently with Ditesco, as well as hiring an engineering firm to look at the efficiency of various ways to get to the new landfill. So here's the new landfill. The conclusions that have been reached is the most efficient and timely way to transfer solid waste from the existing landfill, which is right here, would be to follow this route over to I-25. and then either come in from the south or go up and around from the north. Even though this I-25 route is around 5 miles longer than any routes coming through Fort Collins and the other communities, it's actually a shorter time frame to get to the new landfill and does not disrupt as many neighborhoods. So we're recommending that we follow this route in most cases, unless there's some, reason that we wouldn't be able to use the interstate. Some of the things that we're working on for the new landfill include more modern ways to protect homes and other properties. That includes these different various systems of fencing. There would be fencing along the perimeter. I think that's pretty obvious, but there's also additional border fencing that are right along the cells that are developed in a new landfill. There's also berming that is put in place. So before any kind of debris may reach an adjacent neighborhood, it's gonna have to go through 3 or 4 different layers of fencing. In addition, we expect to use daily cleanup with work crews. And this here is actually a very large vacuum cleaner that goes along these fence lines and can be pulled with a tractor and collect all the trash that may be flying around the site. Another tool that we'll be using at the new landfill is an on-site weather control station, and that will help us monitor wind direction and speed. And if necessary, we'll be able to close the new landfill and store materials at the transfer station so that we're not trying to bury debris when we shouldn't. This gives you an idea of what a new landfill will look like. It's very different than the landfill that we're operating currently. There's actually a liner system that's within the landfill. We'll be starting in these lower layers. So starting down here, there's what are called cells that are within the landfill. So you only dispose of a certain amount of material at first, and then that material is buried. There are sophisticated systems in place to collect any kind of gas that might be produced by the landfill. Runoff and controls are in place for that, and lots of monitoring wells and engineering things in place that will help monitor what's happening with the landfill itself. We've also, as a team, worked on Tier 2 future development, and that would include a new recovery facility. Most of you would know this as a recycling facility. Some of you would know it as a MRF. We have a smaller facility on site today that collects the recycling material, but then it goes to Denver for processing. So the goal may be that we begin processing on site in the future rather than transferring it to Denver. And then Lou's going to talk more about this, but one of the Tier 2 projects is also to get into food waste and not just yard waste. Tier 3 is our big ideas for the future, things that we really would like to be doing now in some cases, but we're unable to, either from a material standpoint or a cost standpoint. And these will be considered at least on an annual basis by the policy committee. Here's our facility timeline. Central Transfer Station is expected to be running by 2022. The public landfill opened the year after that. The reason for the delay in these two gives us an opportunity to pilot the work and operations at the transfer station. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. So we'll be doing some testing before the landfill actually opens. Yard waste composting gets underway sooner than the other projects. If we're able to find a partner and a market for construction and demolition, we'd like to be underway by 2022. That may be a difficult goal to achieve. And then our food waste and composting, we're hoping to be underway by 2024. One of the most important things is that there's no new tax revenue needed to get to the Tier 1 projects. That's over a $50 million investment on the part of Larimer County. and will hopefully give us this opportunity to divert 40% of our landfill waste. All right. Any questions on my presentation, or Mayor, do you just want us to run through all the presentations first and take questions after?
Why don't we have an hour for the discussion, so why don't you just proceed with the transfer station and Lou?
Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Just give me a minute while I set up my presentation.
So I'll give you, the next item is the update on the transfer station. The presentation will be given by Lou Perez, the Larimer County Solid Waste Interim Director. So with that set up, now back to you, Lou.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So when we talk about the transfer station, I'm going to start off just illustrating some key factors. I have some nice pictures. We have some renderings. We have some nice information for you to look at so you could get a real visual and a real outlook to see what this transfer station does and what are some of the major components in it. The transfer station is about 64,000 square feet. It's going to be right on our site. And there's a lot of modern features associated with the transfer station that are not current. We have an improved entranceway to the transfer station through our scale house. And we have a long queuing area, something that we didn't have before, which is a really big upgrade because in the past we've had some situations where we had traffic on Taft Road, which creates more of a dangerous situation. We'll have an administrative building. In this administrative building, you'll see in the pictures, it's actually a very beautiful building. And in the building, we'll have some office areas as well as a public viewing area where folks could come in and actually there'll be a video screen, sort of an open area where they could come in and see what the operation actually looks like from the inside. We'll have cameras, a display area. So we'll have this as a functioning area where the public could actually see the ins and outs of the transfer station. The operation will handle about 30 to 40 outbound trucks per day. These are the large vehicles that will transfer the MSW, municipal solid waste, to the new landfill that Lori spoke about earlier. And it does, we've engineered this transfer station to have a 3-day holding capacity. And the reason why this is important is because of the wind situation that could potentially occur up there, and we know it will, it's just a matter of time. It will give us the ability to hold the solid waste at the transfer station and receiving it for up to 3 days, giving us the maximum capacity of holding that material until it becomes lucrative enough and able for us to go up and then transfer the materials. This was an option that we elected to engineer into the design. Previous concepts that I saw when I came on board, they were looking at doing a baler building. Up there is an option when we looked at the engineering value associated with that. It wasn't to go with this option of making the transfer station just a little bit larger and giving us extra holding capacity. We also have an improved area for customers. So customers are going to come in and actually unload in a concrete floor in an actual building instead of the mud and dirt of a landfill that they have been doing for many years. So we're going to have a lot of happy customers, believe it or not, because they're going to be able to get in and out a lot quicker and a lot less flat tires too. So that's an improvement. Estimated costs, we're looking at about $25 million just for the transfer station and the facility improvements, sort of the roads, the infrastructure, and Keith Myers and his group are working on that. In fact, they are very close to going out to bid. We just had our pre-bid meeting just the other day. Keith and his group are putting that together along with the behavioral health, which the consolidation of the two projects, as mentioned, will give us some significant cost savings. That's what we're valuing as the proposition of joining with Keith and his expertise on this level. Here's a view of the transfer station, just the building itself, to give you an idea. I talked about an area where the residents could come off. There's an area where residents could come in and actually unload their material. There's 13 bays. These doors are around 18 feet wide. It has the ability for people to come in and self-load, self-haul, and bring in their material. There's also an area here just on the opposite side of the building where the large route trucks, the trucks that go around the neighborhood and pick up trash, they will enter and actually go inside the building, and they will be able to unload. So this building is just a big shell. It's really a clear span building where the capacity allows for trucks to come in, unload, and come out. There is an area in the center of the building, this tunnel here, as we call it. It goes through the center of the building, and this is where the large over-the-road trailers will come in. And from the top of the floor, there's actually going to be some chutes, and we'll fill the trucks from the top of the floor down some chutes, fill up the belly of the trailer, and then they will exit the building and then go on north, as Lori mentioned earlier, through I-25. Here's an overview of there's a top view of the transfer station, what it looks like. Here's the residential area with all the bays. So vehicles will come in and they will unload into these individual bays. The larger vehicles from the route trucks will come in on this side. They will empty in this area. We will have front loaders working inside the building. This area in the middle is where the tunnel is below, and these are chutes where the material would actually go through the chute once there's a trailer right underneath it, and we will load it and fill the trailer, and the trailer will go to this area. This is the tarping area where they will put their tarps, and then they will head down the road. Here's an overview of our whole site. This is our full site here. Here is the compost operation, which I'll talk about just a little later. Here's the behavioral health. Here's the transfer station, what we're talking about. To enter to the transfer station, you'll have accessibility from Taft Road and then come through Trelby. There'll be a new entrance point here. They'll go through scale houses. There's a new scale house area where we'll have multiple scale houses, and then the vehicles will enter either from the north or just slightly south, depending on if it's residential or commercial. Here's a closer look at that view, so you could see where the behavioral health is, proximity of where it is, and if you keep going down the road, this will change. This intersection was a previous design, but we have a new concept that we're going to be putting for this intersection. And then here are the scale houses. And here's the entry roads for the residential side. And here's the entry road for the commercial side. Once vehicles come in, they will exit from here, loop around and exit. And the residents will come in and then come out that same road. This is a wide double lane road to allow the residents to come in and out and exit the facility. Here's a closer view of that intersection. So if you're coming off Trelby, you would come down this road here on the northern side of it, go past the intersection and then lead on to our gate. There'll actually be a gate here where we could close during off hours. And as you exit the facility, you come back the same way and you could head down on the opposites. Oops, I went too far. You head down the other way. Sorry, let me go through this again. I lost my place. There we go. You exit through the same way down Trelby. So this will be a 2-lane road here for the main traffic. If you want to head out to Hidden Springs, you could head this way off of this road. So this is just what the intersection will look like. And our over-the-road tractor trailers, when they start out in the morning, they will come down this road and then head north, and then they will get loaded for operations. Here's a view of the transfer station, or what it'll look like. Again, this is a 3D model of what the transfer station will look like. This is Trelby down here to the top side of the picture, and then oops, sorry, I was going to show you the scale house, but I'll show you this view. The scale houses are down here, and here's another view of the entranceway. This will be the entrance for the residential side, to give you an idea. You have almost 90 feet here of space. So when residents come in, they will back up either their truck or their trailer right into these bays, unload their material, and then head down the same road and exit in this two-way road. On the northern side here, the over-the-road vehicles, the larger vehicles, route trucks will come in and they will enter the facility from this way, and then they will enter here down this road and then exit and loop around and come back out this way. So you can see everything is enclosed in this area. Unlike our landfill, this is going to be an enclosed environment. It's a building where all the material solid waste will be contained until it's pulled into these transfer trailers, and the transfer trailers will be loaded into these tunnels, and then they will be head down the road. Here's another view of the tunnels of what they would look like. Here you'll get a view of the office, the admin building. We'll have a small little admin building for visitors as well as for some staff members. And this just gives you a view, an idea of what the building and the admin building looks like. As far as our schedule, this is what we have. Keith and his team are doing the project management, as I said earlier. And right now, we've just completed our 65% design and engineering. We successfully have gone through that. And we are very close to our 90%, right about the end of July. Keith and his team have already started the bidding process. We've had some initial meetings with our bidders. And by July through September, he's using the CMAR bid process. And it's a very effective system for construction and management. So through that process, we plan to get some very competitive bids associated with the consolidation of both projects. Between November and May, we're going to have the infrastructure construction. This is the roads, the sewer lines, and the data lines, all the main stuff that's needed. And then right around March of 21 is when you're going to start to see the building going up, which is now we're going to start going vertically high. We'll start the construction of the building and the scale house. And that'll take place from March of 21 to May of 22. So we are anticipating our operations to be open right around May of 2022. And that's all I have for the transfer station. I'm going to jump right now and go into the compost. Bear with me 1 second while I switch gears.
Is there any quick question just to illustrate anything?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if not, we'll just keep moving, and then we might have to go back to some of the pictures, but go ahead, please, Lou.
Yeah, no problem, Mayor. Please interrupt me if you have any questions too, sir.
Yep.
We're pretty open here, not a problem.
I have a question.
Okay, John, please.
Thanks, Wade. Lou, has, regarding the, well, I guess Lori spoke to this, but regarding the proposed transportation routes from the transfer station to the new landfill, has Wellington, I mean, are they on board with that?
We've shared that with them before as far as the routes, and we've had public meetings already with this information, sir. We've had, in the past, we've had multiple routes, and I-25 was one of the routes. So this information is not new. This is something that's been shared throughout the community. And I know we've said it in our meetings, our TAC meetings, as well as the public meetings with this route. So my answer to that would be yes, they are pretty aware of the routes. We haven't changed that from our previous conceptual thinking.
So trucks from would not go up County Road 9, or they would generally follow the County Road, the I-25?
They would go I-25 and they could get off right on, they could either go up north and take Buckley, or they could take off, they could get off at Owl Canyon and then get off of that route. So we have two options there, sir. And depending, for example, when the construction's going on Owl Canyon, we may elect to just go north and get off at Buckeye because there's a heavy construction that's going to be taking place with those improvements. So right now, we're tentatively looking at utilizing both of those options, both the Route 9 Owl Canyon exit, as well as the Buckeye exit off of I-25.
All right, thank you, Lou. That's okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Lou, proceed.
Yes, sir. Let me get to my, all right, now we're going to talk about yard waste. For those that saw this, for those that saw this presentation already, we did this morning with the pack. It's the same presentation. So I apologize for those that were in the audience. You're gonna see it twice, but I will go through this fairly quickly due to the time element. Excuse me one second. Let me get this. So we recently completed our 60% on our yard waste, and we're fairly close to achieving our 90% with our yard waste. In our yard waste program, the site is located right on the northeast section of our property, just north of the main entrance. We're looking at a 23-acre site, and one of the main components is our project development has been able to manifest some capital and operational savings since the initial development of the master plan. One of the big things that we've been able to do is the original master plan had the project at around $10 million. And we were able, through the last year and a half, gain some substantial savings, and through some engineering practices and best practices within the industry that we looked at, we've been able to reduce that to about 5.8 million. So that's a significant savings of what was originally projected for this compost operation. The compost site will use some 1.6 million gallons of water for the processing of 30,000 tons. We already have a water source on site. We have a 2.5-inch tap near our maintenance building. And this is a very significant savings for us because a tap of this source, I remember talking to Keith about this, and he threw a $900,000 at me saying, if we had to go do this somewhere else, you're looking at around $900,000 just for this tap. So that is one blessing that we have up there already on that site, which gave us more indication that this was a good spot for us.
Hey, Lou, what was the unit on that? So so is that per year or forever?
That's per year.
Okay.
That's 1.6 million gallons of water per year, sir, for the compost operation. Because of a relative dry climate here in Colorado, compost needs a lot of water. It starves of water, and because you have to keep a 40 to 60% ratio of water content within the compost itself to keep it from going anaerobic. That's just part of the process. So that was the estimate based on the volumes that we're using and using the windrow technology. That is our estimate of the water resources that we're going to be needing for that. Now, in addition to the water from the tap, we're also going to be collecting water from runoff. We have 2 ponds in our operation, one for contact material and one for runoff materials for stormwater runoff. So we will be collecting the water from the site in ponds, and they're lined ponds. And then we're going to be pumping that water and using that water into the compost to capture everything that's generated there. So we're trying to utilize the water from the site as well, not to waste water in any aspect. The compost site, the other beauty of what we have over there, when we were capping one of our cells last year, we were using the borrow area, that clay and that material for the capping purposes of the landfill. As we were finishing up that project, we graded the whole area to the proper slopes. So we already did some preliminary work to that area by getting the proper grading in place in the future content of using this as a future compost site. So between the water and the grading, we've already saved a bit on infrastructure planning just from that development itself. The compost site itself sits in an area that's undisturbed. We don't have any landfill material buried underneath there. It was never used for landfill bury of any material of any sort. It is a rich clay area. It has some 10 to 18 feet of clay. It's just a big clay area that we've been using for borrowed material for many years. And it's an ideal location for this development because the clay will act as a natural buffer to protect the groundwater. So it's really an ideal location just from a geotechnical standpoint of what we are looking at. The groundwater monitoring wells, we're also adding wells to the location. And that's something that we don't have to do primarily for our class 1 compost operation, but we've gone ahead and just put these wells in for 2 reasons. One, we want to monitor it just to give ourselves the safeguard that no groundwater is being affected by this operation. And then 2, as we go into the compost phase 2, when we add food waste, you're going to need to put in monitoring wells. You're going to need an EDOP. You're going to need a CD. It's a more laborious process in the permit wise. So we feel strongly that we're going to go forward with this, and we just wanted to put these safeguards in place today as part of our initial installation. The other thing too that's interesting about our project is we also received a grant from the state of Colorado for $680,000 for composting equipment. There are 3 major pieces of equipment that we're going to need for this compost operation. We're going to need a front loader, we're going to need a windrow turner, and we're going to need a shredder. We're going to need a big shredder. This is a very big piece of equipment. The one that we're looking at costs close to $900,000. And we were fortunate enough to get a grant for this. Now, the sticky side of this is if we don't complete the project, we lose the grant. We only have a year between June of 2020 and June of 21. That's the cycle period for this grant. And we have to purchase the equipment and do the project in accordance with the regulations of our contract with CDHPE for this grant. Other key design criteria from this, we're looking at 26,000 tons of material from Loveland per our IGA. So Loveland has submitted this volume of material, and we already are in agreement through our IGA to process this material as part of our master plan, as part of our whole due diligence with our partners. So Loveland has committed this material, and we're also going to have about 1,500 tons of material ourselves that we're already receiving. And with that, we're close to about 28,000 tons. Once the project's up and going, we'll have this material and we'll start processing. However, we are designing this facility with a holding capacity and processing capacity of 40,000 tons. So we're making the investment today of making the pad big enough for future expansion. That's why the project is about 5.8 million, because we're doing a lot of infrastructure now today, because it's cheaper to put into construction now today than go for future expansion. Cost of construction will probably be double for that expansion area, about 10,000, if we want to add another 10,000 tons of material to the pad. We're utilizing proven compost technology. We're using basic windrow technology associated with the yard waste. Nothing special. You take the materials, you grind them, you put them in windrows, and then you go through a screening process. We have staff also on board too. Both myself and Jeremy Groves have ran compost operations. So we have not only the technology, we also have the experience of personnel here within our staff that knows how to run these operations. And Larimer County is also looking at this we're looking at this phase 1 as operating with the commissioner's approval. We are considering operating this facility ourselves in order to also have a cost savings and not bid this out and have an operator come in and run this for us. The finished compost, ironically enough, we're going to need a lot of topsoil to close our landfill. So our landfill has what they call a vegetated cover on the top of the landfill to grow grass and just for stormwater and erosion protection. Every landfill has to have this, something in the neighborhood of about 18 inches. So we're going to need a lot of topsoil. We don't have that here. We have a lot of clay, but we don't have a lot of topsoil. Instead of importing the topsoil that we're going to need for final closure, our thought process is to utilize the compost that's being generated here. So we actually have a nice closed loop system right within the compounds of our facility. We're also looking at this plan to future growth, and part of the future growth is adding the food waste. So we have designs and engineering concepts already in place of the integration of the food waste, but we're taking this project on as a phase 1, phase 2. Phase one, we want to do the yard waste, and phase two, integrate the food waste. We still need to have more discussion with Fort Collins and Loveland and our other partners of what would be the best methodology for collection, as well as we're looking at systems of processing relative to the collection and integrating that as part of our initial design. I already showed you this landscape picture, so I'll skip this one, but I'll just point out, here is our compost operation. Here's our scale house. So the compost will come, the folks coming in to deliver yard waste will come in from the north and enter here. There's actually going to be a road around here. And then down here, all the MSW, the municipal solid waste going to the transfer station will come here. So we'll have two entry points. The bottom part here will be for the municipal solid waste. The top part would be for the yard waste.
And Lou, while you're on that slide, this is Commissioner Johnson. One of the things you've shared with us is that in addition to the advantages of locating the compost on the northern half of the property, you talked about the clay, you talked about using the material to cover the landfill, which is right adjacent there. But the traffic flow, I think, is very advantageous to this location, and even the traffic flow on Taft Hill to separate some of these functions. Could you mention that?
Yes, sir. That's a great point, Commissioner Johnson. I'm speeding up a lot of the things that I covered earlier this morning because of the time constraint, but you have an absolutely key factor here. So right now, all our traffic is coming in from that northern entrance, and you'll see it right here. Here's a zoom of what the compost site will look like. This is our scale house right here, and this is our northern entrance. Right now, or our landfill, all of the landfill traffic, all of the traffic that goes to yard waste, everything is coming through these gates. And sometimes the traffic just bottlenecks right over here on Taft Road, and we're scrambling just to keep it in the compounds. With this new design, we're actually splitting the flow of the traffic. The yard waste traffic is going to be up here north, and just the MSW and municipal solid waste will be heading down south. And we also have done traffic studies. Keith and his team has traffic studies that they already looked at because they're going through the phases of the design of that intersection. So I would lean on Keith and his team if anyone has any questions relative to the traffic for that intersection, because that's already been looked at, that's already been studied. But to your point, Commissioner, we are splitting some of the flow of the traffic from the north and south instead of concentrating it all in one area. Here's a look at the compost site. We have two ponds over here, one for stormwater and one for contact water. Contact water means anything that hits the compost piles will be collected separately and put into its own pond, and that is different from the stormwater. The two are treated differently and managed differently, but we're taking the water that's generated from these ponds and then put back into the windrows in order to reduce our water sources. These ponds are actually designed, we're designing them for the full design features of the compost site. So we're doing this in phases. Right now, for phase one, we're doing about 40,000 tons. But this whole site could hold up to 75,000 tons. So it has the ability for future growth and future expansion. And we'll be able to integrate that and we're doing the ponds right from the beginning instead of expanding them. So we're adding this cost right now in today's capital dollars. Again, this is the northern site, and this area here are closed areas of the landfill that these two phases are already closed as of today. And again, this site is an area where there's no trash buried. It's just 15 to 18 feet of clay. It's just a very dense area of clay, a pocket of it. And that's where we're planning to put this as of right now. Here's a look at a compost turner in the windrows. I know some of you are very familiar with this. Some of you have never seen this before, but a compost windrow is just when you grind the compost, when you grind the wood waste and the yard waste, you put it into these windrows. These are triangular shaped windrows or rows, You have a piece of equipment like this. This is called a turner, a windrow turner, and it has an auger in the center, and it basically just rotates the yard waste. And as it turns it, it gives it the ability to generate new aeration for the decomposition process. We could also add water to this as we're turning it. These equipment have the ability to have water adapted to it, or you could come behind with a water truck and just spray the windrows. But this is just a basic idea of what the technology looks like as we're going to put this forward. Here's an idea of what the food waste, this is a view of what the food waste could look like in a couple of years. This is an area of a particular facility that we visited and we looked at. And what they do here, and we like the concept, is they have a receiving building for the food waste. So as food waste comes in, you have an actual receiving building with a tipping floor, a concrete floor, and it's an enclosed building. The materials will come in and then they get cleaned up. We have all kinds of cleanup separation equipment to take out any plastic, any contamination. And then it goes into these aeretic static piles. These static piles have blowers of air underneath it. They have pipes and then blowers to circulate air through the pile or pull it out. It uses positive and negative air. And it's also done, you use that to speed up the composition process, the decomposition process. You also use that to control odors. If you're getting in a warm pocket of anaerobic situation, then you reverse the airflow and you actually suck in the air to control odor. This will cure in probably 30 to 45 days, and then it could go into a static pile. What we would do is this would be our windrows here from the yard waste. And then when we go into phase 2, we would add the building and the aeretic blowers or the aeretic static piles. So we'll add on to the existing operation, and this will be the adaptability of the food waste component.
And Lou, you need to be wrapping here shortly.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So lastly here's our timetables. We are now in the permit process with that. Once we have all our permits in place and once we have our location and extent, and that is all wrapped up, we will be starting construction in October. And our goal is to have this operation up and running by June of 2021. So this will all be available for everyone. Thank you. And I will pass this on. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick question. The food waste is supposed to be a tier 1 and it's listed as a tier 2. Can you just explain that difference?
Yeah, so we've taken this approach because the food waste is something that we can't just start it right away. Unfortunately, the food waste will require a little bit more work and development. I think that was a conceptual thought that they had initially when HDR was putting this together. When we looked at this project and started this project, our conceptual thinking was to just break up the food waste as a phase 2. So we're doing phase 1 yard waste and then phase 2 food waste, Mayor.
Okay.
So is it a typo that it's called tier 2? I think maybe I can understand phase 1, phase 2. Tier 2, from what we talked about in the Watershed Policy Council, was, manana. Later, we didn't have a definitive schedule for. Whereas yeah. I think food waste will happen as soon as we can make it happen, right? It's in the first round of funded improvements.
Yeah, I think also too, one of the things that they initially had in the food waste was they were thinking of an anaerobic digester, which is another conceptual thought for food waste processing. That's a bigger, much more robust operation. And I think that was part of the conceptual thinking. That's why they might have looked at it as a tier 2. We're looking at both the food waste and the yard waste as a tier 1 that we could start putting into place, except the timing of it is spread out a little bit more differently.
Right. Yeah, if we're talking phase 1, phase 2, and a tier 1, I think I'm okay with that. Moving it to tier 2, I think would require more discussion.
Very good.
We've aligned our ordinances, thinking that we would have a food waste destination, I guess, is the concern.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to pass this on. Let me get this Zoom back on here.
Okay, so now we're talking about the behavioral health facility, and Lori Stolen, the Larimer County Behavioral Health Director. So Lori.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Actually, give me one moment here. We're going to transfer our technology. So I turned my speaker on and Lou will turn his off. And I think we should be good to go now. So this morning's meeting with the Policy Council, I had about an hour to present on this, and I'm going to cut this presentation down to as quick as possible. So I'm going to go faster than I did this morning, and I will certainly take questions afterwards. So the intention of this is to share the history of the site selection for the behavioral health facility, and to share with you where we are to date with our site planning. We've got some exciting work that's been going on. And so let's start back. We all remember the failed election in 2016, and we put that behind us quickly. And what we did right after that was to do some inclusive focus groups. We were intentional about who we invited in early 2017 to these focus groups to learn why the ballot initiative failed in 2016. And to make quick of that conversation, what we found out is that there was a desire to have an identified location for this upcoming behavioral health facility. And so we immediately got in contact with our Larimer County Facilities Real Estate Group Manager, Jennifer Johnson, and asked her to do a search around Larimer County for optional sites. And some of the criteria that we were asking her to look at were mid-county locations. We wanted to make sure that we were really focusing on this being a county-wide available services at this facility. And so we didn't want it to be centric to any one municipality. We wanted her to look at locations that were from 5 to 40 acres in size to ensure that we had some growth for future possibilities of a wellness campus. And we needed to keep a limit on the value of the land. And at that time we were looking at between $1 million and $7 million. And so she came back with 8 properties, and 7 of them became quickly not considered for either they became immediately unavailable, meaning they were sold quickly, or they didn't come in the right size, or they weren't in our dollar range. And so we are ultimately left with a location at the intersection that we've been talking about here at Taft and Trilby, co-located with the other project that we've talked about this evening. And so this map is a population map, and it shows that between the 2 population centers, the largest population centers of Larimer County in Fort Collins and Loveland, this little red dot is our proposed site. We feel like it's a pretty mid-county located site. If you were to look at this small scale population with relative location of the site, we are darn near dab in the middle. The site selection process continued with us going to the Board of County Commissioners and asking if they would consider allowing the behavioral health project to earmark this land to continue looking at as a potential site. They gave approval for that, and we went into contract with HDR, who is an engineering firm that is still working with the transfer station project, the wayshed project. And we piggybacked on that contract for a 3-day charrette. And during that 3-day charrette, we invited in 21 different participants from all around the community. We looked at our underserved populations. We looked at our community stakeholders, leaders, and partners from all over, and ensued on this 3-day land planning and site design process. And we looked at mission, vision, values, what we wanted this site to really provide in services, as well as with an intentionality of it being warm, safe, and welcoming for folks that were coming in crisis and in hopes of them leaving in a much better state of behavioral health than they came. We looked at the compatibility of adjoining with the solid waste project and making sure that there weren't any unmitigatable circumstances. We looked at the contamination of soil to make sure that there weren't any problems there. We talked with our first responders and co-responders and EMS and our law enforcement partners to make sure that this wasn't an unappealing site for them to transport folks. And we got unanimous support for this being an okay site. We determined that it was at maximum 14 minutes away from our farthest medical facility, which would be MCR in this situation. And the average distance was around 7 minutes to different medical facilities in our community. And so ultimately we came up with a pros and cons list for this site. And truly, I don't need to go through this whole list. I certainly went through it this morning, but just to cut to the chase, what we ultimately decided is there's probably no such thing as a perfect location. What's perfect to one person is obviously not perfect to someone else, but we felt like the pros that came out of this site and the support that it got ultimately made it palatable, and it was put on the ballot in 2018 as part of the master plan. And not only did it win, but it won significantly. 61% to 39% of the voters agreed that this was the right way to tax ourselves, and that this was an adequate site. So since we made that decision and the commissioners in 2018 agreed to earmark this land, we have moved forward with this as the site of the future behavioral health facility. In May of 2019, we brought on our project manager, Keith Meyer. We've heard his name several times this evening with Ditesco. He has been a tremendous partner in making sure that there is good communication and partnership between the behavioral health and the waste shed project. And then we brought on our architect in October of 2019 to continue the site analysis, master planning, and the final design efforts for this facility. So we have completed programming, and we just completed schematic design, and we've on June 1st moved into design development. The RFP for the construction manager at risk is on the street, and we hope to have that awarded and know who our construction company is going to be that we'll be working with through the duration of this project by the end of July. Some of the completed site analysis that we've completed so far include zoning, traffic, noise, topography. We've looked at wind, sun, the views, the costs for campus options, and for programming. For those of you that may not have heard, we are in contract with Summit Stone Health Partners and UC Health to provide the clinical services in this facility. And so they have been integral partners as we've proceeded with the design so far. A few more components of planning that we've gone through and have experienced. Again, we're at 30% completion with design. As Lou had mentioned earlier, the transfer station is proceeding a little farther along, but we anticipate that we have a pretty similar opening timeline. We've spent right around $300,000 so far on site-specific design costs. And we do, if you don't already know, our planning commission for L&E on June 17th for both of the projects. So I'm going to jump in quickly to a few visuals of our site. And we'll start off at a satellite view, and then we'll kind of drill down and we'll get a little closer to the ground and look at a few three-dimensional renderings. So as we're looking at this site from a pretty high level, where the red cross is where the 40 acres for the behavioral health facility is situated. And what we have, I could actually go to the end and bring us backwards. But ultimately what we have are unobstructed views into nature going to the west and towards the northwest. And what we have going to the east are views into the community. If you haven't been out to that corner, it is quite a beautiful spot. It is bordered to the south by Coyote Ridge, and it's bordered to the east by Kathy Fromm Prairie, both open spaces that we're all very familiar with. As the Page architects have continued through design, we started off with a sketch of what the facility would look like and how we wanted to situate the facility on the site itself. And we decided that this was the most logical site. It was the best for wind and for weather and for the view shed to the west and to the northwest. And so as you can see, the patient wings of this facility are around the back side of the building. So the windows and the transparency as we come through the building really do allow that the most attractive site possible. This is my favorite slide. I think it really represents the intentionality of this project. And the architects did an excellent job, I think, of kind of rendering some design views here of our purposes, our focus of coming through the building and focusing on the views to the mountains. An expansion was sort of a journey through. It kind of follows the sentiment of the treatment and the services that they will get. So as we get closer into some more renderings here, you'll see as when you come into the main lobby, that there's great natural light that comes through the building. The intention is that people would transition from sickness out here towards wellness, towards calming, and towards an outdoor respite. So our landscape architects have put in a significant amount of work to make this back space, this outdoor respite area, with labyrinths of walking trails and communal meeting spaces, and just a warm, safe, welcoming outdoor area for them to have some time. Lastly, we look at kind of some densities of the building up front and transitions towards the lightness and openness of the building back towards the views again. This is an overall site master plan that we did with the focus of this in a current project is building number 1 right here. Again, you can see the patient wings towards the back of the building with these walking trails that are planned. Future ideas and potential partnerships that we could develop out over time after we've got the facility up and running are adolescent services, dental, vision, primary care services here, and then possibly even up to and including some permanent supportive housing. Again, these aren't things that are developed out right now. They're future conversations that need to be had with partners in our community to build out a potential wellness campus into the future. We want to focus on our building right now and making sure that it fills the most critical gaps that we have in behavioral health care in our community. So I'm going to quickly move into some renderings that we have of the facility so far. You can see the intentionality again of kind of driving towards the front of this building and out through the back of the facility with some of the circular lawns and walkways and concrete pathways that are there. This front corner is intended for our law enforcement, first responders, co-responders, EMS, easy access to a sally port, if you will, where they can drive in, multiple vehicles can be in there, and they will have their own emergency entrance into the facility. And once inside the building, they will have a lounge, they'll have restrooms, they'll have a reporting area, a place to sit down and do some paperwork if they need to. Within this sally port, there's a cleaning station if they need to clean out their cars, and it's a safe place to transport and transfer clients from their vehicles into the intake area of the facility. Moving on, this is another view of the facility, more from the front. You can see the clear story of this main entrance as you come in into the front lobby. The second story of the building is planned out for this first phase, and the load of the building will be planned out to be able to expand up on this western portion of the building, but that will be for future expansion needs. There's going to be a shareable community space, a conference room in the facility that we'll get to in a picture that I'll show here in just a few minutes. As Lou referred to a couple times earlier about the location of the transfer station, I share a picture here that shares both locations, and you can get a visual of the distance between the two and how much ample space is in between 1,500 feet from building to building. And this is, the orange lines here are showing those expansive walking trails that could be included in the back of the behavioral health facility in this current phase that we're working on. So we're going to jump quickly to the interior of the building, just some current renderings that we have from our architects that show as you walk into the building how much light and openness and transparency there is. This bottom left picture shows the open conference room space that the community could reserve and come in and host meetings there. It's got an open welcome lobby here, and to the immediate left there's a pharmacy, a retail pharmacy that will be open to our community as well as to folks that are coming in to get services, family members, visitors, et cetera, in the building. This top right view is on level 2, and it shows layers of transparency to allow as much natural light in as possible. And then down in our behavioral health triage hub, which is this kind of corner over here of the building, it's the inner part of the building. And I'm actually going to show you this, if you can see that roof well right there, that skylight coming in, that's actually this, and it's a light well. And it really is to help spread natural light through the most dense portion of the facility, trying to make this as much of a healing space as possible. We know that people that come in crisis need to make sure that they feel safe in the facility that they're in, and that the views that they have will continue to support the healing that they're going to be working on. So these last interior views are of some of the multi-purpose spaces in the detox areas of the medical withdrawal area, part of a nursing station in our crisis stabilization unit up here. And then this is a sample of our patient bedroom, a 2-person room, simple, safe, lots of anti-ligature considerations, and then lots of open space and windows for them to view outside. This last slide that we have here are actual 3-dimensional renderings of the view from our behavioral health facility looking west. And as you can see in this middle picture, up here in the background, that's the actual transfer station. So it's actually pretty difficult to see. This is the sunset coming down on the foothills to our west. And then also this is a kind of, as the sun's gone down, a view of where the transfer station would be up here with a few of the fence marks from that view from down at our behavioral health facility. So with that, man,
well, thank you.
I can do this presentation in an hour or in 15 minutes.
Thank
So
you, Lori. With that, I'm going to ask Karen Champagne. She's our planning development transportation person. We asked our planning department to take a look at the siting and so forth. So Karen, would you like to give about 5 minutes of your findings?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all. It's great to meet you virtually. My name is Karen Champagne. I'm the Director of Planning, Development, and Transportation, and thanks for the opportunity to collaborate with the county on this project. And Lori, that was such a fabulous overview of the site planning and the architecture, just some wonderful work there. So I just want to lend some perspective that our team brought to this conversation and our opportunity to review. We really focused on the guiding principles of city plan, and certainly we brought in a plan for the region between Fort Collins and Loveland. So this was sort of the lens we were bringing to our evaluation. And I think just given that the scope of our review is focused on location, character, and extent, we just wanted to raise a few high-level points for your consideration tonight and kind of see how all of this works together. So from a land use and character standpoint, what we want to make sure we're bringing to this conversation is the vision of a rural and natural character for the area. This isn't an area of a community separator between Fort Collins and Loveland. So let's talk about kind of how best did we achieve those goals with this project. The next thing is just really thinking about the distance between the health facilities where the clients may also be getting treatment. And Lucinda may also speak to this as well, just from an equity and environmental and social justice standpoint. But we want to think about those location efficiencies between the other services that these folks may also need easy and convenient access to. We also brought a lens of just, again, kind of from the social justice standpoint, we do want to acknowledge just really thinking about what will be the experience for folks that may be vulnerable going to this location, and being adjacent to industrial activities in the vicinity. So this would be a great point of discussion for you all as well. Just really thinking about noise and air pollution and some of those impacts. So again, I may be overlapping a little with Lucinda's perspective, but everything is so intertwined that I wanted to give voice to that. And the final point just around transit and access. So we certainly grounded in the principles of city plan, we want to be thinking about multimodal access to our services for our communities. And so we did want to raise that topic of how well will this facility be accessed to transit to folks that would be using the facilities, as well as sort of the employees, as well as the clients. So those were a few topics that came up in our evaluation, and we welcome the discussion around those points. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for setting that up. Why don't we go to Lucinda Smith real quick and just talk about the equity and the environmental evaluation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I'm Lucinda Smith. I'm the City of Fort Collins Environmental Services Department Director, and I also want to thank everyone for the presentation tonight. There was so much good information in that. And so just a couple of points also that our team has brought up. We know that this whole area has been planned at one point for solid waste improvements. And knowing that under the regional waste facilities, we'll have the transfer station and then the future construction and demolition debris facility being very close to the behavioral health facility. And we've heard a little bit tonight from Lou about the truck traffic associated with the transfer station, queuing of 30 to 40 trucks in that area. So really want to raise the point about the compatibility uses, recognizing that the behavioral health facility desires to be a serene and healing environment, and it's relatively close still to an industrial site. And as Karen mentioned, it is, we want to make sure that the users and clients of the behavioral health facility really are not exposed to environmental concerns as well. And nobody would want that. So another couple of points that I'd like to bring up for consideration have to do with environmental considerations in the area. One has to do with gases that have been detected in the area. Methane, elevated levels of methane have been detected in that area. And that was the reason that the planning department comments suggested completing a phase 1 environmental assessment. And then if pollutants were found or recognized environmental conditions were identified, it would be important to follow that up with a phase 2 assessment. Again, because we wouldn't want environmental contamination to have a disparate impact on the vulnerable populations who are using that facility. And then another environmental related issue has to do with groundwater. We heard earlier this morning when the Regional Watershed Policy Council was discussing it, that a geoengineering firm was used to evaluate groundwater. And I simply wanted to pose a question regarding what studies were done to determine if there is no groundwater contamination at the site. And this is really just bringing up questions about what steps could be taken to mitigate those environmental concerns if they turn out to exist. And then Karen mentioned the transportation issues, so I won't mention those again. And lastly, a point is just about the longer term growth of the facilities. And if the behavioral health facility or the regional waste shed facilities desire to expand, they would end up encroaching on each other and really exacerbating the potential conflicts of potential uses. So I think with that, I'll stop, and thank you very much for the opportunity to raise a couple of these points for your discussion tonight.
Thank you very much, Lucinda. So now why don't we open it up for general discussion and with the great presentations. And so anybody would like to start off?
I'll start, Mayor. If that's
Mayor,
okay.
I can.
Kristen, then Ross, please.
Okay. So yeah, and thank you for everybody for the reports and excited to see the work that's being done, with regard to the landfill and the transfer station. I share those concerns that Lucinda and Karen brought up about environmental justice issues around having a space that's supposed to be for healing and being so close to an industrial waste facility. And I'm sympathetic to the idea that we looked at this as a site a long time ago. I'm sure that was true. I don't know that people understood that there was still going to be such heavy industrial work being done there when the site was You know, and maybe I'm wrong on that. But my guess is that people thought the landfill would be closed and there would be, you know, a lot of mediation done to the site, and then it would be a site for that behavioral health facility. So, you know, some of my concerns is that, I mean, in a way, it doesn't make a difference how it happened in the past. But we're faced with this site that I think that there are concerns about, you know, I mean, I don't have to reiterate what the concerns were: groundwater, noise, smell, industrial facilities, close by, truck traffic, you know. And so, I mean, I have a lot of, I mean, and I know it's late in the game, and I apologize that it's late in the game for us to bring this up, but, you know, I am very concerned that we're going to put a place for people to heal in a place that doesn't feel very healing, and it doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do. And I would hate to put it there and then have to deal with these concerns into the future and wonder why we couldn't have found a different site when we had the opportunity to do so. And so I just, you know, I think that we have to take these, you know, environmental justice concerns seriously. It's really important that we put people in a place where they can heal, and not say these are people with mental health issues and compound their problems by putting them in a site that doesn't necessarily feel that healthy.
Thank you, Kristen. Ross?
Yeah, well said, Kristen. I mean, I've shared these concerns for a while, but in addition to the environmental issues and the potential impact, both on the mental health operations, as well as potential restrictions on the landfill site operations, I've been concerned, I've said it before, that we might be sending an inadvertent message, and I'm going to put it bluntly, that we're going to send people with mental health issues to the dump. And I think that is a message that will be out there. I don't think it's the message we intend. You know, we're always very careful to talk about transfer stations and windrows of food waste reclamation and so on, but the community doesn't necessarily use those same terminologies. And I'm with Kristen that, you know, the time to, it may be late in the game to be changing now, but it would be even later if we built the facility and it had this negative perception and negative impact on its operations and on the existing landfills, future landfill operations. So you know, and I think the city would be glad to help continue to look and see what we can do in partnership with Larimer County to try to come up with a new alternative. But I think it would be effort well worth spending, even if it costs some number of months of delay of breaking ground for our new mental health care facility.
Thank you, Ross. Any other, who's next? I'm looking for a raised hand, or just step in here. I'll just share. I've stated all along, and we'll go to Emily. Emily, why don't we go with you, please? Emily?
Oh, hi, Mayor. Hi, everyone. I don't have anything to add. I would just support Kristen and Ross's comments about concern about the location of this and the impacts. And, you know, I think the facility looks great, but at the end of the day, it's next to a landfill transfer station and a compost facility. And I just don't think the optics are good. So nothing more to add, but in support of the comments that have been made.
Thank you, Emily.
Wait, Mayor, I'd like to say
John,
a few things.
please, John, go ahead.
I mean, does it matter to the folks who have spoken from City Council that, yes, it is in relation to the transfer station and the composting facility, but it's also adjacent to some pretty amazing open space area and trail systems. Doesn't that matter? Does it also not matter that when we've run this by the Technical Advisory Committee, Summit Stone and UC Health and other practitioners, apparently, to my knowledge, they've not raised any red flags about this location, being co-located, if we do it right, with the transfer station and the composting and recycling and efforts.
So, I mean, can I answer that, Mayor?
Ross, yeah, Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, you're right that there are beautiful natural areas and foothills vistas there also. It's certainly better to have those than to have, I don't know, a bunch of auto body shops or something to the south of it or something. But I suspect that there are maybe other sites that have similar vistas, maybe not quite as inexpensive, but that maybe we could help find a way to make happen that would avoid the issue of the landfill. Because I think that it's more than just, I'm concerned that we'll find in 5 or 10 or 15 years that this was a huge mistake that, and I don't know that the Summit View people, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that the Summit View people have been made aware specifically of the environmental concerns that we've raised. They may have had the implicit assumption that because we're calling this a sanitary transfer station and yard waste composting facility, that it might be all okay. But I think it's at least worth having some discussion with them to help make sure that they are aware that there are these environmental concerns. And then also, I would like to hear their perspective. I don't know that I've explicitly heard their perspective on the concern that I raised, the perception in the community that we're dumping people in the mental health care facility.
Thank you.
I think I would just add a question that I'm wondering if that committee had the option of other locations, or if this was the one location they were given, and then asking if this would work. And so is this the only location they were given to work with, or was there more discussion about finding another location?
I think
Lori,
Lori would be the one to answer that question.
Thank you for that question, Emily. The only site that was moved forward for discussion with HDR was the site that we're looking at right now. The other sites that were under consideration early on became unavailable or cost prohibitive or not the right size, or not within that mid-county kind of range of space between municipalities, without us trying to be Loveland-centric or Fort Collins-centric, and really trying to focus on sort of that band of space in between both cities. And so the only site that was taken forward after the initial review of multiple different sites was the Taft Hill and Trilby.
I would add, I did receive a call. It was, I don't know, maybe a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, but from UC Health, and say, why wasn't, Mountain Crest considered as a partner? So I asked a question this morning, what about public-private partnerships, and thinking about how we might have explored other ways than just finding a siting location. And so that's where I think that, and I'm not trying to disparage any decision process, but at the early stage when you're looking at options, you really want to have a wide funnel to look at multiple options and not look at available, least cost, and that sort of thing. But what's the best site for the outcomes you're trying to achieve?
And thank you for your comments, Mayor. And I would just add to that the Board of County Commissioners and the behavioral health stakeholders and partners feel that we did adequate due diligence in looking at a variety of different sites. And if there would have been concerns with this site as the review was going on, I believe that we would not have pursued this site. But because we did end up with more pros than we did cons, and there were no unmitigatable concerns that we had, it was the reason that the county has decided to move forward with this site.
I understand the site aspect, but I was making a point around public-private partnerships and funding mechanism and financing, and how that could be an option to open the funnel to other solutions.
I'll refer that for comment to county leadership.
Okay. Anyway, other comments, discussion?
I guess one thing that I would add is that I think is relevant is the county recently went on another commercial site search for our fleet shop, and similar size of a site needed for that. Some differences, access to interstate in different parts of the county played into concern with that site selection process. But what we learned from that was that there really are not other commercial sites that would be suitable to the behavioral health center of that size in the county. I think they're in the range of $5 million additional dollars or something like that. But what I think is relevant is that going out and trying to find a different site at this point would be extremely difficult and extremely costly and very likely totally non-productive. The only result would be delaying the process, and that's based on having gone back into the market. We actually had to go in twice, and we actually had to hire commercial real estate brokers to do some searching for us, and it was a very, very difficult situation in the marketplace for this kind of site right now. So that is, we have considered these things, and we've weighed them. You brought up some additional points. We're happy to take under consideration with some of our providers as well, obviously. And you know, if somebody's going to give us 40 acres for free somewhere, we'd look at that as well. But we're happy to look at these things. We're always interested in additional input, and we appreciate that, because obviously this is something that's going to last for generations in our community, and is going to be very important to the mental health of our community and future citizens of our community as well. So that's very good input.
Thank you, Steve. Other discussion?
One thing that, Mayor,
Kristen, please. Yeah.
one thing that we had talked about too is, you know, I know that there's this desire to site this facility somewhere kind of equidistant from all these communities. And I think in Fort Collins, I mean, we're not necessarily wedded to that idea. I mean, I think that we would be open to having it further away from us and having a site that felt where we wouldn't have to do all this mitigation, where we wouldn't, because, you know, I knew about some of the mitigation. Honestly, the elevated levels of methane, you know, that was a new to me. And so, you know, I don't know what the plan it would be to even mitigate for some of these the concerns that have been expressed. So I guess I would, you know, in looking at a different location, I would be more open to the equidistance between municipalities would be less important to me than having a good, healthy site that where we could take care of people and not worry about environmental health issues in addition to, you know, people with mental health and addiction issues.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Well, Mayor, I may get myself in trouble, but I mean, since these concerns seem to be primarily coming from the city, is the city able and willing to devote some resources to looking at, within a specific time frame, to looking at other locations that might meet the needs of what we're talking about?
I would say
I would support at least staff time, and we'd have to see what is beyond that based on what we figure out from there.
I would be open to having, you know, a conversation and discussion around it, and where does that lead, and lead to, and what resources that might need. And Darren could help guide us in you know, basically providing the resources.
John, was that, and I know you prefaced your comments, so I get the risk in asking what you asked. If I can over-interpret your question, would the city be willing to work with the county on an alternative sites analysis on an alternative site analysis and do that in short order, I would say yes. If that's, I don't want to overinterpret, and I will say, I know that there's been comments and apologies about the lateness of the hour. In fairness, I don't believe this is the first time that at least the county staff has heard that city council members have concern about this site. That's been something that we've been telegraphing for a long time. And when I say long time, I mean months.
Or years, actually.
Or years, maybe, yeah. So John, again, maybe to provoke the conversation, I really appreciate your question. I would say my guess is that the council would support that, and we would partner with the county staff and expend resources to look at that. But that requires two things: one, that the council would support that, and two, that the county would be open to that.
And the second part of your question, I suspect, John, is would the city be willing to commit money to helping to make some land acquisition or some lease or something happen? Is that also part of your question?
Well, I think so, Ross. I haven't gone that far. I mean, Darren talked about a site analysis. I presume that means finding an appropriate site, and if the city, which is, this is coming from me, one county commissioner, is willing to devote resources and expend, staff time to seeing if there's an appropriate site, I think the county would certainly support that effort. But again, I'm speaking for myself, and I think it has to be within a specific time frame, because I really don't want to see this thing go backwards. So we have a commitment to the voters to move forward. I think a lot of analysis of this location has been done, and so that's to clarify my question or my statement, Darren and Ross, that I think we would support your efforts, but that you guys need to lead the charge and devote some resources. And ultimately, it's about finding an appropriate location that would allow for expansion, that would allow for things like supportive housing, which we've talked about, and a variety of other things that in this design that is in a location that I still think it shouldn't be smack dab in Fort Collins. But that was a commitment we made to the voters, that it needed to be in a location that was accessible to folks from Estes Park, Loveland, Berthoud, et cetera. And I think that's still important.
Well, the good news, John, is that there's no site in smack dab in the middle of Fort Collins that will meet all those needs. But yeah, and to answer the question you didn't really ask, I think I would support some amount of resources even dedicated to helping make a partnership or acquisition work. How much we would spend, of course, depends on how much we have available, what our budget is, and what the actual project is. But we see mental health as an urgent need in our community. And I agree with you, we don't want to delay too long. So, I would consider this a, Mr. City Manager, please expedite this analysis phase type request from council.
Yeah. And I would add to the site, alternative site analysis is also financing and public-private partnerships, because I think those options are as critical as just finding a greenfield site. And so, in fact, that's where I think you get to some creative structures that provide leveraging that haven't been, I see, cooked into the equation.
Mayor, when you talk about public-private partnerships, you're referring to the aspect of this project related to land, an appropriate site, because we obviously, the county is not going to run this thing, that the private sector is going to run this behavioral health facility. So could you clarify your comments, sir?
And without giving a whole lot of thought to it, other than the call I received from UC Health and about summit around a mountain crest. I know, it's not a large site, but when you begin to start thinking about other locations that might be with UC Health and maybe MCR or somewhere in a place like that is serviced by transportation, multimodal, and other kinds of services that that are bringing that basically implicitly bring in some of the concerns that we've raised here tonight. But clearly, a lot more work has to be done.
Thank you for clarifying, Mayor.
Other discussion.
Commissioner Kafalis, it seems to me that to just have the city of Fort Collins on a search effort on its own would be probably not the most productive. I think having your county team involved in that, as well as possibly Loveland, we again, this isn't about I mean, first of all, this is fabulous news, and I'd like to say we were really proud of the fact that Fort Collins voted across the board the first round for this, supporting it. So it's clearly a need in our community and a priority for the council. And then the second vote went extremely well as well in Fort Collins. And so the need is there. The great news is the county has the resources to do this. So there's not an effort to hurt or to slow down or be less productive. It's actually to optimize. And so what I think about is if we were to do that solely on our own, which we could do, but I think it would be incomplete to have the county and perhaps the city of Loveland and looking south. Maybe it's the Harmony Corridor. Maybe it's I don't know what the areas are, but we certainly could do that on our own, but it would be probably more fruitful to have other folks involved in that conversation as well. And again, the spirit of the conversation, and I know because as I've shared this with Linda, this isn't my opinion. This is our elected body of Fort Collins continually expressing concern about this site. And so, we come at it with a very positive attitude. What makes this very difficult is where you are in your process right now. But if we're looking at 30 to 50 to 100 years out, this conversation very well could be irrelevant to the optimal location. This timing is, and this site that is under Larimer County ownership now, and admittedly will save you several millions of dollars. But I think the thinking is out 30, 50, 100 years, will that even be a relevant point?
Well, I appreciate that, Darren. And I would submit that the savings are not for the county. The savings are for the people of Larimer County, because they're the ones who voted for this thing, with certain understandings. But I can't speak for the other commissioner. I think we need to bring this back to our shop. But from my perspective, I'd like to see the city of Fort Collins lead this effort, and not alone, because we've already made an effort to try to find a site for these other things, and it's been very difficult to find a proper site, for the other needs that we have with the county. But I feel like maybe I've spoken out of turn here, but I need to bring it back to our folks and have a conversation based on this discussion. And in the meantime, I'm hoping, and I'll probably get myself in trouble even more, and that is that we can move forward on the composting facility, regarding the location and extent application. Might as well put that in there, right?
Yeah, I have a question on the composting, and that is the original project cost for yard and food waste combined cost was $11.8 million. What's the current estimated cost for both the yard and food waste? And then there's a additional part to that is to by relocating the compost facility to the new location creates challenges with expanding for food waste. And so assuming that we're not still at the 11.8 for food and yard, there's a concern that food waste facility may never be built.
So Mayor, if I might answer that,
Yeah.
the cost for the yard waste have actually decreased. The cost for the food waste estimate side has actually increased. So the total project cost is 15 million at this time. There is enough room on that site for us to move forward with food waste composting at that location. We do not have to move it again, and it's one of the reasons that we wanted to move to that location. In the master plan previously, they were separated into 2 sites, and we believe that we can keep them on this one site in the event that we're able to move forward with that. We have the water there. One of the big challenges, and I think it probably is a mistake on the slide, that the food waste got moved to tier 2. That's a slide we repurposed from another presentation, and it may have got moved into that category by someone because there's a big demand to get more yard waste in order for us to move to the food waste. So it's not something that there's enough materials right now or within the next couple of years that we could move into that food waste composting. And so I think either inadvertently or on purpose, it got moved to the future because it's probably a 3 or 4 year project.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We're about 5 minutes left, and who still has any questions, conversation? We'll start wrapping, and what are next steps, and Darren and maybe Linda or Steve and me, you know, we can maybe wrap some things.
Mayor, let me, if I can, just make a couple of comments. I think, you know, if there's a genuine interest in taking some time to look at alternative sites and to do that in a pretty expeditious way, then, as I said before, if the council agrees with that, I'm all in, and we'll resource that and we'll have that conversation. If there's not, if that's simply a waste of time and a waste of process and a waste of resources, then I would suggest we call it here. And my take is that is really up to the county commissioners as the decision makers on this project. We've expressed our issues through the planning commission process. We'll do that. I know the planning commission, Karen Champagne, who spoke first, her group has provided written concerns about the project and maybe areas to focus on. Lucinda has expressed some of those. We had those in writing. We were going to provide those, and because the planning commission meeting was delayed, and then this meeting was scheduled, we held off from writing those comments. But if there is an interest in doing it, then I'd say let's get on it. If there's not, and that was just an idea that maybe John was contemplating, we're all so busy with so many different things. I don't think that would be a good use of resources if the commissioners aren't genuinely open to that. That would be my wrap,
Darren. And I appreciate that, Darren. And I don't think we're probably ready to say yes or no right here in this meeting. We would want to consult with our staff, but I'll be honest with you, I'm very, very unlikely to support what John has suggested. Our staff has done an extremely exhaustive search on this. They have done an extremely exhaustive consultation with providers. This has been through a countywide campaign twice. We've not heard this concern from the citizenry about this location. I don't want to waste your time either. We do appreciate the input you had on those specific environmental questions, and I know our staff will follow up on that. But you know, if my staff comes to me and says they think there's value in this, they think it can be done without delaying what we have promised to the voters, and frankly, we pretty much promised this location to the voters, not precisely, but it was in the master plan. Everybody's known it since the very beginning, and I'm very reluctant to change things that we promised the voters. Voters don't like that. Now, if we come up with something better, I think the voters would be fine with that, but they generally don't like it when we don't follow their instructions. We all know, elected officials all know that. I mean, to be honest with you, the site isn't perfect. Lori Stolen said that. We've thought about these things. We've considered them. We've looked for sites for this several times. We've looked for sites for our fleet shop a couple times. We know what it's like to look for sites. Like I said, we're always open. You know, if something fantastic happens, we would be fools not to take it. But to be honest with you, I think there's almost zero chance of that happening. And I, for one, am not really willing to put this process back months and months and millions of dollars based on what I've heard now. But I certainly am willing to look at the concerns you've raised with our technical advisory committee. We do appreciate that, and we would be happy to do that.
Thank you. Anybody else? You know, I just want to thank everybody and just providing the opportunity for the commissioners and our council to get together tonight. And you know, we both of the county and the city really want success for both of these projects. And they're both very important to both of us. The relocation, the closure of the landfill, and providing for the transfer site and the composting and additional facilities there as time requires, and then also the behavioral health. That was fully supported by the city of Fort Collins both times, and we're excited that it's proceeding. And really, it's compatibility of uses and so forth that is the issue. One of the things that I mentioned kicking off, that in our pack this morning, we did talk about having a public a session, a public open house, and you know, and really not to stir things up, but just to have, you know, transparency and conversation within you know, the community, so there is a general awareness of how these plans are playing out. So I think that's an important step that we can commit to in working with the county.
And Mayor, I think we'll bring it back for discussion internally. I think we want to engage in these things in good faith. And with that in mind, I don't think it's an inappropriate ask to say, in order for the landfill project to move forward, will the city sign off on the location and extent application so we can move that process forward regarding the composting? Because that seems to be delaying things on that side. And to me, that would be a show of good faith that we can continue to move forward on all these issues. We'll bring them back and we'll see how we can work together. So there's a specific ask there, Mayor and
Okay.
Darren.
Well, why don't we discuss that? We'll take that back, and I actually need to learn more myself about where that stands and understand the situation.
Understood, sir. And as I understand it, you know, we're co-owners on that northern end of the landfill site. We want to do the the yard waste facility up there. And in order to move forward with our land use planning process, location and extent, we need the co-owners of that property, the city of Fort Collins, to sign off on some kind of a document. And that's what we're asking. That's what I'm asking. I think that's what we're asking.
And I know that's pending. Yeah.
Of course, sir.
Other comments? Well, we're at the hour, and thank you so much for taking your Thursday evening, and it's always valuable when we get together, and thank you for participating.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council colleagues. And I don't know about you, but this is my 4th Zoom meeting today, so I'm done with Zoom meetings.
You're zoomed.
Yeah.
That's true. It is tiring. Yep.
Darren, I am City Manager Darren Atterbury. I'm zoomed out at the moment.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Night.